more trees join the millions already felled in the Amazon rainforest. Does it matter? I mean, after all, the rainforest in the Amazon basin is the largest on Earth. There are billions of trees in the forest. It is the richest ecosystem on Earth. This ecosystem contains around 50% of all the species of plants and animals in the world. It is the oldest ecosystem on Earth, according to some scientists, more than 100 million years old. It has survived Earth movements, drifting continents, ice ages, so why worry about it? We worry about it because forests like this can become wasteland like this in a matter of months. And no one knows whether it will recover. Vast areas of trees have already been cleared, but only now are we beginning to understand how the forest works. We're going to look at the conditions which exist in the rainforest that make it so unique and such an important environment. The Amazon rainforest stretches from the east coast of Brazil to the foothills of the Andes in Peru. The forest area is nearly 8 million square kilometres. That's 30 times the size of Great Britain. From the air, it's a never-ending mass of trees. You could fly over the forest like this for hours. Seen from the rivers, it's a jungle, a chaotic tangle of life. But there is a degree of order. Here we're 35 metres above the forest floor. We're looking out over the treetops. This is a canopy and you see a few tall trees standing out above the canopy. Some of these are 50 metres tall. Lower the camera and we pass through the canopy layer itself, the branches of trees 30 metres tall. Lower still, and we enter the under canopy, the branches of young trees waiting to break through into the canopy. And nearer the ground, the shrub layer on the forest floor. So definite sections: shrub layer, under canopy, canopy, and emergent trees. We can see it better in a model forest. The emergent trees, the canopy, the under canopy, and the shrub layer. The question is, why is the forest structured in this way? The answer is light. Light is one of the key factors determining the nature of the rainforest. of the plants in the forest are involved in a life or death struggle for sunlight. The energy of the sun is needed for the process of photosynthesis. Once the canopy was formed, sunlight was almost completely shut out from the forest floor. Some plants have adapted to the dark. Some will catch the sun for only a few minutes of the day. Some make a dash for the canopy. Trees grow tall and straight towards the light. Others climb towards the sunlight. They cling onto the trees and they can be more than 100 meters long. If a tall tree should fall, there's a rush to take its place and break out into the light. But it's the canopy that captures most of the sun's energy. That's why it's the engine of the rainforest. It is here that the vegetation is most luxuriant. It is here that the flowers and fruit appear. And it is here that most of the animal life is found. By comparison, the forest floor is dark and quiet, and the wildlife difficult to spot. But there is a lot going on there. We'll find out more later. As well as light, plants need water and warmth, and there is no shortage of either. In fact, Amazonia is one of the wettest places on Earth. An average of 2,000 millimeters of rain falls here each year. It is also one of the hottest places on Earth. Why is there so much rain? This is the Amazon basin on the equator. The temperature rarely falls below 25 degrees Celsius. The high temperatures mean that the air over the basin is warm. Warm air tends to rise, creating an area of low pressure below. Moist air is drawn into this low pressure from the Atlantic Ocean, where pressure is higher, and it causes rain. But that doesn't explain this. Watch. This happens most days all over the rainforest. During the day, clouds build up, and in the afternoon, there is rain. What causes it? This is the basin, the air hot and full of moisture. As the sun gets higher in the sky, temperatures rise, and locally, the air begins to rise. As it rises, it cools and condensation takes place. Clouds form, rain falls. This is classic convectional rainfall, and it occurs all over the basin as the sun tracks towards the west. But there's something else. Most of the water that falls actually goes back up into the atmosphere. Some of the rainfall is intercepted by the trees and is held as moisture up in the canopy. It evaporates. The rain that reaches the forest floor is taken up by the roots and carried back to the canopy. Some escapes from the leaves in a process called transpiration. So as little as 20% of the rain escapes down the river. The rest is recycled. In fact, the water in this river may have fallen as rain as many as 5 times before it reaches the sea. High temperatures and heavy rainfall lead to high humidity in the forest. Conditions are ideal for plant growth, but the trees need something else. They need nutrients to grow, but surprisingly, they don't get them from the soil. This is a tin mine deep in the forest. The men are working 15 metres below what used to be the surface of the ground, and yet they have not reached solid rock. It's because the rocks here have been broken down over millions of years by the rain, heat and humidity. The weathered rock can reach depths of 15 to 20 metres, but it contains few minerals and few nutrients for plants. Look at the roots of this fallen tree. Why do you think they're so shallow? Living plants depend upon nutrients taken up from the soil. Soils in the Amazon basin seem to be deep, but they are poor because the nutrients have been washed out. So the trees send down only a few thin roots into weathered rock. The main root system is near the surface. The reason for this is that all the nutrients that the forest needs come from up above, from the forest itself. The forest appears evergreen, but most of the trees are in fact deciduous. They shed their leaves, but they shed them throughout the year, not all at the same time. It forms a thick litter of leaves on the forest floor. The leaves are seized upon by insects like these leaf-cutter ants. They take them to their nests in the ground and digest them. Fallen trees or branches are attacked by termites. These are the first stages in the process of decomposition, during which the organic material of fallen leaves and wood is broken down. In fact, in conditions which can decompose rock, entire trees can quickly crumble away once they fall. All these processes make nutrients available to the growing trees. And the forest has evolved ways of capturing the nutrients before they get washed away by the heavy rain. Look again at the forest floor. It's a tangled mass of fibrous roots. In amongst the roots are fungi which help in the decomposition process. It's a highly efficient system which soaks up everything that's available and feeds the trees. Other plants in the forest have their own ways of getting the essentials of life. Some plants grow halfway up big trees, rooting in crevices where rain and leaves collect. Other plants are parasites. They take food from the host tree. while others send out long roots from up above which can take in moisture from the air. The forest is not the same everywhere. Here we're in what's known as the flooded forest. The trees have adapted to being submerged for part of the year. The incredible diversity of life in the Amazon rainforest exists because the plants and animals there have devised so many ingenious ways to get their share of the essentials of life. In fact, the rainforest depends on two almost closed systems. A nutrient cycle where leaves, branches and trees fall to the forest floor, decompose, and then the nutrients they provide are taken up by the trees to provide new growth. And a water cycle. Rain falls, some evaporates from the leaves, the rest falls to the forest floor, some runs off into rivers, the rest soaks into the soil and is taken up by the trees. Some of the water is given out through the leaves. It's another continuous cycle. Cut down the trees and you break these cycles. This is what's already happened in large areas of Amazonia. Rain is no longer intercepted and held in the forest. It strikes the surface of the ground direct. The nutrient-rich humus layer of soil is washed away. All that remains is poor rock debris, leached of its nutrients. Useless earth. The question for future generations is, could the entire rainforest end up like that? A festival in an Indian village. The Chikuna form the largest Indian population in the Amazon region, and like all indigenous people there, they're fighting to hold on to what's left of their culture. The Western clothes, jeans, t-shirts and trainers, might suggest that they're fighting a losing battle. In the western region of the Amazon basin, near the foothills of the Andes, there are 25,000 Chacuna Indians living in scattered villages. The life of the Chacuna is dominated by the forest. Here, a huge tree trunk has been hollowed out to make a canoe. The heat and smoke from the fire dries out the wood, but when it is warm it can be stretched from tree shape to canoe shape. The Chacuna were one of the first Indian groups to be contacted by the Portuguese explorers who came to the Amazon area of Brazil in the 16th century. Like many Indian people, their culture has been changed a great deal by contact with the outside world. Some traditions and skills, though, have not been lost, like building dugout canoes. It's been going on in this way for centuries. The canoe will be used by men of the village when they are fishing. The Amazon River system teems with fish. There are more freshwater fish here than all of the rest of the world together, and the Indians know how to catch them. The fisherman uses a line to catch his fish. But he can also use a spear, spotting a fish in the shallows at the edge of the water and spearing it with deadly accuracy. Fish are the main source of protein for the people of Tabatinga. Tabatinga has 25 families, a population of around 150. The village is neat and well ordered. The houses are built from small trees, palm leaves and bark. They're on stilts to keep the insides dry in the rainy season and to keep them cool. They are built around a community building called a maloca. It is here that the Chacuna meet to discuss village matters. The land around the village is divided up into individual plots for each family, but everyone in the community helps with the heavy work of cutting down trees. The timber will be used to build houses, to make canoes and spears, or as firewood. But the real purpose of this bout of tree felling is to clear an area of land of about 3 hectares for growing food. Some of the tree stumps are left in the ground. They'll be difficult to remove and they prevent erosion. It's tradition that the woman of the family which is going to farm the land lights the fire to burn away the waste wood. It will bring good luck, but the burning puts ash into the soil which acts as a fertiliser, providing nutrients for the crops. When those nutrients are used up, the clearing will be abandoned and a new one will be cut in the forest. This is shifting cultivation. The plot looks very untidy. The crops are scattered round tree stumps. They are all mixed up rather than being in distinct beds. But it is efficient and does little damage to the forest. In fact, the land may be farmed again after 30 years. This is the main crop, manioc. a root vegetable that is a central part of their diet. They also grow pineapples, bananas, some corn and beans. Any surplus is sold or traded, usually for clothes. Everyone in the family joins in the work, and from the age of 6 or 7, the children will have their own plot to tend to. The village has come to depend more and more upon gardens like these. The men do still hunt. Once they used bow and arrow or blowpipes to fire darts tipped with poison, but that's something that's been lost from their ways. Nowadays they use a shotgun, obtained like the axes and machetes in a trade from a town along the river. But the cartridges for the guns are expensive. This man is the only one in the village who has any. Even so, he's only got 4, so everyone must count. The hunter is an expert shot. This time his catch is a grey Saki monkey. Kills like this are rare, and the Chikuna depend much more upon the river for food. The Indians can find a use for just about everything in the forest. They know that there is poison in the roots of this vine. They're going to use it to catch fish. Again, this is a communal activity. While one man builds a dam, the others cut a mass of roots. They carry the roots about 1 kilometre upstream. While the boys and girls mash up the roots, one of the women is making a basket that will be needed soon. The mashed up root is swirled around in the water. Meanwhile, the basket's almost finished. The poison will stun the fish in the stream. It paralyses their gills. They can't breathe and they have to come to the surface for air. That's when the Indians can catch them. Or they wait for them to float downstream to the newly built dam. Fish is the main source of protein for the Indians. This catch is a week's supply of food for 2 families. It's not only the vines that are poisonous. Manioc, the main crop from the garden, is also poisonous. The Chikuna know how to get rid of the poison so that the root will be safe to eat. First it's ground up, then it's put into a special basket made from woven palm leaves. The juice is squeezed out. The manioc is cooked in a very large pan over a fire. Manioc is made into a gritty flour called farinha. It is an important source of carbohydrate. So the Indian diet is basic: farinha, fish, vegetables and meat if they can get it. And fruit from the trees which have been left standing around the village. The boys are gathering a fruit called inga. It is a long thin pod with seeds inside. The seeds are wrapped in something that looks and tastes like marshmallow. In many ways, it seems an ideal existence. It's always warm and sunny, the food is plentiful, if limited in variety. There's room to play and be free. The Chukuna work hard, but if there's no work to do, they love to sit and talk and share a joke. But there are pressures on indigenous people throughout Amazonia, not just in terms of outside influences on their cultures and traditions. The lands are constantly under threat from business interests who want to set up cattle ranches, or dig for minerals, or cut the trees down for valuable timber, or just from land speculators. In the past decade, more than 500,000 indigenous people have been moved from their traditional lands, often forcibly. There have been many killings. In many places, the outside world is closing in on them. At school in another village just downriver, Chukuna children are learning skills that they will need in the world outside their homelands. They're taught science, mathematics, and the language of Portuguese, which is the main language of Brazil. But they also have lessons in their own language of Chukuna and about Chukuna culture, which is still very strong. Back to the festival. It is taking place in a bigger Chukuna village, an hour by canoe from Tabatinga. The centrepiece of the event is an ancient ritual. There are many like this within other Indian cultures in Brazil. This girl has just reached puberty. To mark the transition from childhood to adulthood, and as a punishment for her sins as a child, every hair on her head is pulled out. She's been given an alcoholic drink to make her drowsy, but it's still incredibly painful. Everyone in the village, boys and girls, has to go through this. The hair soon grows back. To our eyes, it may seem unnecessarily cruel. To the Chukuna, it's a part of their history that they're determined to cling on to. "800 kilometres to the east, on the banks of the river Taruma, live the Ramundo family. They are caboclos, descendants of Indians, Portuguese settlers and African slaves. Their way of life is quite different. Caboclo people don't live in villages. They own their own plot of land, usually by a river. They are small farmers and spend most of their time working on the plot. Like the Indians, Caboclo people grow their own food, but they also produce a lot of extra fruit and vegetables which they sell to markets. Their farming is more organised. Notice that their crops are grown in straight lines on larger, tidier plots. The caboclos usually clear an area of forest and plant it. When the soil is exhausted, they enlarge the clearing, leaving the old land as pasture. Eventually, the clearing becomes very large and it is more difficult for the forest to regrow. This is another form of shifting cultivation. It is slash and burn cultivation, and it can cause permanent damage to the forest. For this family, this harvest is of pineapples, inga fruit and sugarcane. Unlike the Chukuna Indians, they keep a few cattle to provide meat and milk for their own use. Caboclo family are much more involved in the local market economy than the Indians. They take their produce to market once a week. The market is in the city of Manaus, 4 hours away by boat, so the river is their lifeline. Being able to trade, sell their produce and buy other goods gives them a different way of life to many of the Indian people in the region. Further east along the river, there are Caboclo people with another lifestyle altogether, a lifestyle not based on the forest. Here, the trees have been cleared. In the basin of the Amazon, the people live on the várzea, the levees and islands of the floodplain of the river. For 6 months of the year, they're surrounded by water. In the dry season, their homes are on land, but during the wet season, the river level rises, and this causes many problems. The farmland is underwater, and they depend on their livestock and fish from the river. Every morning, the men from each family have some hard work to do, cutting down long grass that grows on the flooded meadows of the Amazon plains. It's hard to imagine that in the dry season, this will be farmland. It will be some of the most fertile land in the Amazon basin because of the silt deposited by the river during flood. When the water is high, it's a different sort of harvest. The cattle live in these raised corrals throughout the season of high water levels, and they have to be fed every day. It's back-breaking work. But it's worth it. For this small farmer, a cow is a good investment. It can be kept for food, but it can also be sold if the family needs some money quickly. Also, a cow will continue to grow whatever the weather, whereas crops in the fields depend upon the changes in the river. Fishing is no easier than farming in the wet season. There is much more water in the river because of the rain, so the fish that live there have more room to move. That makes them more difficult to catch. The Caboclo people of the floodplain look to fishing for an income, but only when the river is much lower than this. The season of low water is the season of plenty, when the abundant crops from the farmland and the fish from the rivers provide food to sell in the markets and for storage for winter. The lives of the Caboclo people of Amazonia, like those of the indigenous peoples, are closely linked with their environment: the river, the floodplains, the forest. But those places are changing rapidly under growing pressures of development, so the lives of the people will also change forever. Exploiting the Amazon rainforest is nothing new. The first kind of industrial activity was this. Manuel is a rubber tapper. He gathers latex and natural resin which forms just under the bark of a rubber tree. Manuel works an area of 30 hectares of forest. There may be 30,000 trees on his land, but only 60 are rubber trees. He can harvest from the tree many times, and he does virtually no damage to the forest. In this, Manuel is almost unique among those who exploit the rainforest. Nowadays, almost everything to do with exploiting the forest starts with this: the cutting down of trees. Here they are being cut down for timber. So far, the main logging activity has been on the edges of Amazonia, where roads have been built. In fact, transport is a major problem. That's why only the most valuable trees are cut, and that means mahogany. Mahogany is worth up to £500 per cubic metre on the world market. Demand for mahogany is particularly high in the United Kingdom because many people like to have mahogany furniture or doors. Unfortunately, mahogany trees are also quite rare and they don't grow close together. Only 1 to 2 adult trees are found per hectare. That has serious consequences. To get to a mahogany tree in the middle of the forest, roads have to be cut through. When it's felled, the tree often pulls down other trees that are connected to it by vines. Then the cut tree has to be dragged out to the road. More trees are damaged on the way. For every mahogany tree that is to be cut, as many as 28 others are damaged in the process of getting it. After the mahogany is cut, the loggers may go back into the forest, this time for less valuable wood. But at this stage, more timber is taken out, up to 20 trees per hectare, and the damage to the other trees is the same as before. Cutting like this begins to have an effect on the overall health of the forest. It's a massive problem. In this one small area of forest alone, there are 2 chainsaw operators working each day. They have to cut down at least 30 trees a day to earn their wages. That's 60 trees a day, 300 trees a week, 15,000 trees a year, just in this one small area of forest in Amazonia. The movement of lorries loaded with felled timber is relentless. Everything depends on access by road or by river. This raft is made up of around 3,000 freshly cut mature trees. Whether carried by road or river, the timber all ends up in the same place, the sawmill. It is estimated that there are 4,000 sawmills in the Amazon region. In this part of the sawmill, they take a tree, chop it into smaller pieces, and then slice it up like paper. These thin sheets of wood will eventually be glued together to form the inside layers of plywood and used to make cheap furniture. Tropical hardwood is in great demand all over the world. Up to now, most of it has come from the tropical rainforests of Asia, but the tropical rainforests there are almost exhausted, so the attention of the logging companies is turning more and more to the Amazon. The forest is still vast, but already in Amazonia, logging has damaged large areas, often in a form that is not obvious. Elsewhere, there is no doubt that large-scale destruction of the forest is taking place. This is a cassiterite mine in the province of Rondônia. The rocks underneath the surface of the earth in Amazonia are rich in minerals: gold, copper, bauxite, iron, nickel, manganese, lead, and mining them is big business. The mine is called Bom Futura. It means great future. At one time it was the largest tin mine in the world, but it is coming near to the end of its life, now producing 3,000 tonnes of cassiterite a year, compared with the 15,000 tonnes at its peak. The cassiterite ore is found in weathered rock, and it can be mined using high-pressure hoses. It is worked into large ponds where it settles out. Left in the middle of the site is a hard core of unweathered rock, which won't yield to hoses, but it still contains some ore. The only way to get at it is with a pick and shovel. The work is very hard and the rewards are small. Men, women and children live and work on the mine to scratch an existence. Each one stakes a claim to a hole in the ground and keeps the proceeds. They're lucky if they earn £10 a day. However the ore is mined, the next stage of the tin process is the same. The ore has to be separated from the particles of rock that bind it. To start the separation, the cassiterite ore is heated and ground. The process is carried out several times. Eventually it's washed. The lighter minerals are washed away. The heavier tin sinks. This is the final product from the mine. It will be exported all over the world to make tin cans. It's valued at $6,000 a tonne. But this is the environmental cost, an ugly scar on the landscape. Amazonia already has many mines like this, and there are other things that are waiting to be exploited from under the Amazonian soil. Large reserves of oil and natural gas have been discovered, and there are deposits of uranium. So mining and extraction are set to make this sort of impact on the Amazon rainforests well into the next century. But the biggest cause of deforestation in Amazonia so far has been cattle ranching. Rondonia was one of the first areas to be opened up when settlement began in the 1960s. Farmers flooded into the region to take advantage of the free land on offer from the government, but today most of the farms are cattle ranches. This is the Dallas Ranch in Rondonia. Once the whole area was covered with rainforest. Now it's so big that the ranch owner has to give instructions to his ranch foreman by mobile phone.
Alô, Valendo, pega esse gado aí do pasto 3.
Feito. Tá ok, tudo de bom, tchau.
He keeps 2,000 cattle on 3,000 hectares of land. It sounds huge, but by Brazilian standards, this is only a medium-sized ranch. The neighbouring farm covers 15,000 hectares. These are zebu cattle, specially bred for tropical conditions. Ranchers here use the modern techniques of beef and dairy farmers around the world, like artificial insemination to improve the quality of their stock. It was once said that Amazonian beef was used in hamburgers in the fast food outlets around the world. But in fact, it's not true. Amazonia doesn't produce enough beef for its own population. The reason for this is that cleared rainforest gives way to poor cattle pasture. Much of the soil in Amazonia is highly acidic and not very fertile. Within 2 or 3 years, the only thing that will grow is grass. Grass so poor that even the cows are reluctant to eat it. It would need huge amounts of fertilizer to turn it into rich pasture, and fertilizer is simply not available in quantity in the area. So cattle get what they can from the grass, then have to be moved to other fields. If the rancher runs out of pasture, he simply clears more forest. But clearing land for grazing is a way of claiming possession of land in Brazil. And the big companies who own the cattle ranches now own vast areas of Amazonia. They will control more, if only because other settlers are deserting the land. Tens of thousands of small farmers came to Western Amazonia to take up the free land offer. Roads were built to provide access. Altogether, it's estimated that 1 million people came here to start a new life, only to have their dreams turn to nothing. Marisvaldo de Souza was one of those settlers. He came to the state of Rondônia in 1984 after seeing television advertisements which promised a new start and a new place. His first task on his 50-hectare plot with his family was to clear the trees so that he could plant crops. But he soon found, along with thousands of others like him, that the Amazonian land could not live up to the promises. Though this may look plentiful, the infertile soil generally gives poor yields. Marisvaldo gets by with a main crop of coffee. He is also part of a cooperative which sells beans to buyers for the big coffee companies. But prices are low. The same applies to his other produce like cocoa, corn, rice and fruit. He says the government promised them help with fertilizers and good prices for their crops, but they haven't stuck by their promises. But at least he's hung on in there. Many thousands of small farmers have deserted their farms and moved on, only to repeat the same sorry experience elsewhere. Taken all together, the exploitation of the Amazon rainforest so far has proved highly damaging. Estimates of the rate of deforestation vary widely and are the subject of much argument. Environmental campaigners say that the rainforest will have disappeared in 40 years' time. The Brazilian government's official figures talk about a lifespan of another 300 years and more. Whatever the lifespan, can we afford to lose one of the natural wonders of the world? Why would anyone want to build a vast dam in the middle of nowhere? – Create one of the largest artificial lakes in the world? – Create one of the largest artificial lakes in the world? – Create one of the largest artificial lakes in the world? – Create one of the largest artificial lakes in the world? – Create one of the largest artificial lakes in the world? – Create one of the largest artificial lakes in the world? – Create one of the largest artificial lakes in the world? – Create one of the largest artificial lakes in the world? – Create one of the largest artificial lakes in the world? – Create one of the largest artificial lakes in the world? – Create one of the largest artificial lakes in the world? – Create one of the largest artificial lakes in the world? – Create one of the largest artificial lakes in the world? – Create one of the largest artificial lakes in the world? – Create one of the largest artificial lakes in the world? – Create one of the largest artificial lakes in the world? – Create one of the largest artificial lakes in the world? – Create one of the largest artificial lakes in the world? – Create one of and in the process flood 2,400 square kilometres of rainforest.